form, something that would not be what I normally make to experiment with. But there's also a lot of pressure because it's someone else's piece too. Yeah. He's like, whatever, but.
It's just a piece of clay. And if you notice, like I have 2 pieces over there that are done in my raku clay body, and I have 2 that are done in porcelain. So I've never pierced porcelain before. And I threw them, waited a day, then pierced them. So they look kind of like I hacked at them. So don't judge that. I would have waited longer to actually pierce them, but I wanted it to the effect to see what it would look like on a white. So we're not going to I'll raku these 2, and then we're going to cone 6 fire the other 2 with the piercings. So no, like that. And they all have like a little square pattern on the middle. Why I went about that is, yes, if we would have talked longer about like we were actually doing this, we would have had more prep time as far as design and pattern and things like that. But a lot of Meredith's designs, if you don't know this, I'll let her get into more detail, are the designs from paper towels or toilet paper, the little stitching.
Mm-hmm. That quilt sort of dimpled.
So that's why I did the little square, so it kind of reflects that. I didn't know any other patterns to do that represented that, so. So we're gonna jump around, jump around a lot. She's brought some pieces that she's did the molds of oval. I'm gonna show you how I do an image transfer on those. I'm gonna do an image transfer on them and then try to pierce since they are oval. I've never done this before.
Well, and also it's my casting slip body, and we're not sure how forgiving it's gonna be for piercing. We'll find out.
That's what's good about workshops, is like we get to have fun and play around too. Yes, we're gonna show you what we enjoy doing, but it's also time for us to experiment and things like that too. So I will throw for a little bit. She can do surface. At any time, if you want to get up and just see what she's doing, please.
Yeah, feel free to come
do
closer.
that.
I'll also try to, show.
When you're done, can you have them post images and inspired?
Yeah, I'm sure to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That would be interesting.
Nope.
And actually, I'm going to take a picture before I do anything so that I have each stage.
And it's kind of funny that so if you follow me on Instagram or my Facebook page, you'll notice I take pictures of all of my pieces in the pierce stage. So I have files on my computer of every pattern I've done before it's even fired.
I don't do that.
I do it just as a record. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
this worked. This one blew up in the kiln.
That's good to know.
So and it's fun to play around, and you'll see big patterns back here, and we'll get to that. That's another little fun thing that we're playing around with. So.
I have a question before I start going here. Do you normally keep all the measurement lines, or do you smooth those out, or are they stay?
I keep the lines when I pierce. It shows like the process.
Yeah.
You can clean them up.
Well, I didn't necessarily need to. I was just asking.
No.
Okay, so the lines will probably hang out. Okay.
And and the lines, they're just the typical way I try to not use. Again, if you're using a stoneware clay body, you never want to use a sponge to clean it up because it just takes all the clay away, and then it brings all that rocks and grog and all that stuff to the surface. This clay body that I'm using is the raku clay body that I've had that Les makes. We've never sold it before. Lucky for, if you're interested in raku, he brought 500 pounds of my clay body.
So it's slightly different.
It's completely different
Completely
than what
different.
they've sold before. So if they have it, if you want to buy some, this is the only time you're going to be able to buy it. I didn't know that he was doing that, which is okay. I completely love him to do that. But it doesn't have the sand or the grog in it. So it throws like a porcelain, and it stretches really nice. And then it can be raku fired. It can actually be, I've tested it up to cone 12. So I've pulled pieces out at cone 12 and tried rakuing them. So.
Really? I'm glad you mentioned the sponge thing because I was about to just go sponging this thing down. I'm used to working with porcelain, so.
You can use a sponge. You can use a sponge on that just because it doesn't have so much grog.
It doesn't have as much. Okay.
Yeah, just don't be like burnishing it.
Like this?
No, like.
I'm like, that's what I'm kind of doing. Oh, the challenges of working with a material you're not used to. And in ceramics, everything can be so finicky. There's this little traits here and there. Okay.
Because in my eyes, I think the porcelain ones are going to be beautiful. I think the raku ones are going to be beautiful too. But I think how I glaze them with all the clear crackle, it can take away from all the colors and patterns underneath it. You know, and I've never played.
No. I'm looking at those thinking,
And some of those, you have those decals. So like the red loops, so those are decals. And I'm starting to play around with raku and decals, but I don't know how your decals will do compared to the ones I use that are metal. So when I put them in reduction, they might just burn off or melt away.
I don't think they'll make it. Yeah.
You have metallic decals though, don't you?
Metallic? I don't. No.
Okay.
I do have one set of gray decals that I had made while I was in China that I thought were just going to be light gray. But when I received the order, they actually were slightly metallic. And I'm like, ooh, that's a happy accident. But it wasn't intentional. Let's see. So I'm going to pick out a pattern. I think I'm just going to go for it because, I don't know, when it's something I'm not used to, I'm trying not to freeze up. But so I use a bunch of different screen printing processes. Today I'm bringing out my Thermofax screens. And so these are just like a rudimentary silk screen. And to make these, I have this machine called the Thermofax, and it's basically an outdated piece of office equipment where used to make transparencies back, you know, when we used overhead projectors, which there's really no use for these days. So I think there's a new machine that's being produced right now, but I couldn't tell you the name. I just heard about it last week. They come and go. But it is, now the Thermofaxes are kind of more used for like craft type applications. My introduction to it was when I was at Kansas City Art Institute. My senior year, the sophomores in ceramics were going over to the fiber department, and they had the machine there, and they were burning these screens. It takes like no time to do it if you have the right film. And they were screen printing on tiles, and I thought, oh, how are you guys doing that? Because it was something I'd never really seen on clay at the time. And they said, oh, there's this machine in the fiber department. And so you could silk screen also with ink on fabric and stuff with these. But what I think is so cool with the clay is that it's flexible, so I can go around, you know, cup surfaces and bowls. There's so many different things you can do. It is easier on a flat surface, but both work really well. And let's see, so for the Thermofax, what I do, I guess I can talk about my patterns quickly. Eric mentioned they're all from what I call like overlooked domestic patterns, AKA toilet paper, paper towel patterns. And so I've collected all of these like swatches for, I don't know, like 15 years or so. And then I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, I thought, oh, maybe I could be using these in my work. And so what I did was started to trace them out. They're too subtle to just scan into the computer. That white on white doesn't quite read. So I'll dot them with a pen just in a section, and then I'll scan that. And when you actually get that in the computer, you realize that a pen dot is not a dot at all. It's like this weird jaggedy shape. So then I digitally retrace those with actual little dots, and then I recreate an entire like page full of that pattern. So this is what I would call the dot dot quilt pattern. I rename them just so I have a reference to the shape and what design. And let's see, I have a few here. This is dot dot floral, dot dot biscuit, the octagon. Anyway, so sometimes you recognize some of these if they're a brand you happen to use. This one's a paper towel, this one's toilet paper. This one actually used to be, it was a Target brand toilet paper. And so this is what I call the quilted pattern. And then recently they changed to a scallop pattern, maybe recently, like a couple of years ago. And then now I see the quilt pattern has actually gone more in like commercial rolls. So I'll see them at restaurants in like the bigger rolls versus, you know, for the house. And it's funny. I see this weird trend from residential to commercial commercial to residential, because these are things I pay attention to and find interesting. So anyway, once I digitally retrace, make the whole sheet, this is what I can use to make my Thermofax screens as well as decals. So I've made iron oxide transfer decals as well as China paint decals. So those are screen printed also. And I currently don't make those myself. I farm them out because I've decided that my time is worth, I mean, it is a hassle. It's not fun to have to switch gears completely in the studio to make a bunch of those. So I decided a few years back that I would have someone make them for me. And that's worked out pretty well as far as the screen printed China paint decals go. Okay, I'm gonna pick a pattern. Okay, so the Thermofax machine, I have my printout and I have this green sort of film. It's plastic on one side and mesh on the other. And so when I line up the printout against the shiny side, I run it through this machine. It's this rectangle. Mine's a lovely avocado green from its time period of use. There's some harvest gold ones out there. And you run it through, and it's like a belt system. So it would be kind of like this. And then it runs through, and there's a heat bulb. And wherever there is toner on the paper, it burns out the plastic, revealing the mesh. So it's this instant, like, silk screen that pops out. And so this would peel off of the paper. And then I tape the edges just with packing tape, or some people use duct tape or like painter blue tape. This just helps it not curl on itself, because when it comes out of the machine, it wants to roll on itself and be kind of a hassle. So tape them up, tape the edges, but they're still really flexible. This one is the pinwheel pattern. I think we're gonna go for that one. And then, so I used, I'll underglaze, and I usually use the Amico velvet underglazes. They're kind of my favorite. And for screen printing, straight out of the bottle is too thin. It's just gonna bleed everywhere. So I thicken them up. Either, like, the best way is just to let them dry out on their own. And that sometimes my patient level doesn't allow for that. So there are ways of speeding up the process by adding like a little bit of CMC gum powder in little amounts, which I might do right now. So let me see, or maybe I have some that's ready to go. I did bring some thick stuff that was all ready from the studio. Yeah, let's just use this. So this is the turquoise blue. And I have a little palette knife to help mix it up. And so I think most people probably know the consistency of underglaze, but this is really liquidy. If I pour it, it's gonna just pour right out, right? This is how thick I like my screen printing paste underglaze. So yeah, it's not going anywhere. I can fling this around and it's gonna stay on there. This dried out on its own, but I do have a bunch where I've added the CMC gum, and I'll probably do that a little later to screen print with a different color. Let me just get this mixed up.
What's unique about your work is, even though like the velvets, there's like 80 different colors out there, what Meredith does is she mixes colors together so that she makes her own colors.
Yeah.
So that's what makes kind of her work unique is, because I've been there like, how'd you get this color? She's like, well, so I had to invite her in for a workshop to figure that out.
I told you what I did. I'm really pretty open about everything. So like, for example, the underglaze pink. I'm not a real big fan of the color that actually comes out fired. I fired a cone 6 also, I should mention. So it's not just a low fire. I feel like it's a little more true to what it's going to look like. Cone 6, sometimes they can change a tiny bit. And I know that they have different charts for each different like firing temperature, so you can kind of get an idea. So anyway, I'm like, I want a different type of pink. Like I want a bubble gum, like ballerina, kind of sickly pink. And so I tested out every different red that I could find as far as underglaze goes, and just adding a little bit of white. And then I made little test tiles, and they had, darker to like lighter, adding more white. So, and then each red had its own test tile of like 4 different gradients. And then I put all those, fired those, and decided, okay, well, this one's more of a purpley red or purpley pink. This one has more of a rose. This one is, a little bit lighter. This one, and there was one that was like that Barbie bubblegum pink. That's what I was looking for. So it ended up being radiant red. And so I use radiant red. You just need a very small amount, and it gets a really strong pink color. So on my work over here, anything that has pink, say at the bottom of that little jar, that is radiant red and white. Okay, I'm gonna actually screen this now. I'm like getting off on different tangents here. Okay, so I have my screen, and with the Thermofaxes, I screen shiny side up. The mesh side I put down against the clay because if any underglaze kind of mushes through, the mesh stops it a little bit more from bleeding, whereas the shiny side lets it run a little bit more. And I screen print with my finger. You can screen print with a rib or, I don't know, any sort of tool, but I find that this is my favorite. Especially because I can look at the screen and see where I want to press down. So I don't have to do this entire thing. Like I can pick and choose areas. And so now I'm going to line up with here and see.
While she's doing that, I'm just doing a flared bowl. This is the one, if you do get Pottery Making Illustrated, the magazine, this is one that was in there, the article that just came out. Meredith also has work in the issue with her collaboration with Alex. So if you haven't seen it, they have it out front. But this is just, lately I've been doing a lot of flared bowls. I enjoy them. Variations. And it's like this surface area. They're not functional. Raku's not functional. But I am starting to get larger in my work, which I'm not going to. I feel like if I come to a workshop and throw large, then I expect the rocker crew to trim it. So I'm just, I'll just throw small ones. And plus I'm doing a workshop tomorrow in Wichita. So these might transform to Wichita so I can pierce them. So, basically I teach students, if you can throw a cylinder, you can throw anything. Some people believe that, some people don't. But again, a lot deals with the clay. So with this clay, I'm able to stretch it quite a bit. I can make these really thin, I can make them really thick. Usually Raku is supposed to be really thick so it can keep that thermal shock. I kind of disagree. I don't want it paper thin. If you do it paper thin, then say this is a peach clay body. When it's bisque fired, it turns peach. I don't do a white crackle, I do a clear crackle. And then when I Raku, I scope it in several cans. That starving of oxygen will bring out the white in the clay body. So I've actually used Paul Solner's red clay body and reduced it so much that's turned white. So just a little, go ahead.
I peeled that off. So I have this, I use the turquoise blue, and so I have a little section here of the pinwheel. And you can see that I only press down, it's kind of all the same color, sorry. I should have used a higher contrast. But just a section of the screen. And I'm going to go ahead and print another section. And I can still use the clean part of the screen. This is gummed up now. It dries a little bit and it seals off all the mesh holes. So I can use this empty part, and then once this is done, I can just clean it and then reuse it almost immediately. So that's the nice thing about them too. Let's see.
Thank you. Just wanted it to move so people could see. Whoa.
All right. Will you do some of this turquoise too? Thanks.
And when I throw, I usually, I'm very impatient. If I'm going to throw, I'm going to throw. So I sit down a whole day, like Meredith sit down a whole day and just glaze or decal. It's just, I don't jump from one thing. So if I'm going to sit down, I'm going to throw 20 bowls or 10 bowls. I don't throw just 5 because if I have a goal of 10 because my design on the first bowl will make me think of another design, and by the 10th bowl, my designs will be more elaborate than the first one. But with that being said is, if I didn't have a heat gun, which I love this thing, students aren't allowed to use these in school. They have to use a hairdryer. I don't like a torch. Some people like torches. I don't like a torch. I'd rather
Why?
use this. Huh?
I'm just curious.
I just don't. I think a torch just hits one area, and mine starts sweating a lot. Where this, I can control it. I can do a direct flame, or I can do an open flame. So I use this a lot before I lay anything down. So it takes about 3-4 minutes to get to the leather hard stage. True Value, Ace Hardware.
I'm going to peel this guy real quick.
Make it look so easy.
It's not that hard.
So I'm gonna,
Right.
because like anything, if I left this, like I'm noticing like, I've never really had somebody work on my work. I've had students try to do it.
Isn't it kind of weird seeing someone touching your baby's?
Well, it's like, I
oh,
don't
screw
I don't
it
have a
up.
piece of my work in my house. I will not have a piece because I don't want to look at it and critique it. So I have
Nice.
other people's art. I have tons of Meredith. I'm like, I wonder if I could do that for him. But as I look at this, I'm like, when it dries, these will raise up. So I'm going to try to lower them down as much as I can because, but yes, there's also that type of it'll collapse. How I came about this little flared bowl is I was eating at Wendy's, and it's an upside down light fixture. So I'm like, oh, that could be a bowl. And one of my mentors, Sheldon Ganstrom in Hayes, Kansas, does a variation of this. So I say I stole it from him too, if he's listening.
Just to cover your butt.
Just to cover my, we do art fairs together, so. Huh? Yeah, I know. I'll probably have a text from him here in a minute.
So I cleaned off just with a sponge the front side and the back side, and then I just pat it dry. I usually use my leg for this. Sometimes I'll have interesting patterns at the end of the day.
How long does one of those screens usually last?
I would say with heavy use, like if I'm using it a lot, probably 6 weeks or so. I mean, that's like I'm using it a lot. I can pass around a couple so you guys can see them. I also have ones that I've labeled as old. These are no good anymore. So they kind of dry up, and if I don't take care of them, they do have a bit of a lifespan. Anyway, here. This is a good one, and then these are some old ones. Check them out. Take the pinwheel back. Looks like I missed one little point on one of these pinwheel patterns, so I'm going to go ahead and, the nice thing about this being translucent is that I can line it back up, and if I miss a spot, I can just hit it again. There are other screens that you can make for this type of decorating. It doesn't have to be the Thermofax machine because it's not the easiest thing to find. But this is a different version. These are easy screens, like EZ screens. And they come with the emulsion built in to the silk screen already, and you just burn it by putting it outside in direct sunlight. And so you can have a screen within a couple hours, essentially, versus this 10-second kind of through the machine thing. But you don't have to have the machine to do this type of thing. And I know that there's also some sellers on Etsy that will make thermofaxes for you. So if it's something you want to try out, you can get a custom one made or just buy a pre-made design and then give it a go to see if it's something worth pursuing. Or if you have a very specific project, the easy screens, you can make something, for say a commission, and it's just one screen and can use it later or not use it later. But I think this might be about $9 a screen. But this without the whole equipment thing is probably like $5 or $6. But these last longer. They hold up a little bit better. Go ahead and pass it around. The one issue I have with them is that I rely a lot on layering and lining them up, and so the fact that I can see through this is really important. So that one's a little more difficult because it is pretty opaque. So it takes me longer to use those. But they do work just pretty much the exact same way.
How long have you been doing that?
Let's see, I was introduced to the Thermofax machine probably in 2000, and I didn't actually start using it until probably 2009. I knew about it, and then I maybe did a couple projects in grad school using it, but it wasn't my main sort of source of decoration yet. And now with my current work, I still do some of the screen printing, but I have moved a little bit over to more of just like underglaze stenciling, which I'm also going to do in a moment. And then instead of screen printing the pattern, decaling some of the pattern. So there's been subtle shifts in my work of how I use all these decorating processes. Okay, let's see.
I think last night was the first night I've ever seen your work without dogs on it.
So there is a show that just opened at the Belger Art Center, and it's one of the shows. It's actually probably the first NCECA show to open.
Yep.
Would that be accurate?
That would be correct.
And it's like KCAI Collections. So it's collecting people who have collected work from the student shows from 95 to 2015. And so I went to the Art Institute 97 to 01. And there is a T-bowl of mine in the show from probably 1999. So, work has changed dramatically since then.
I walked right by it. I mean, I had.
You would never see it and be like, oh, Meredith made that, But I saw it and said,
it looks good.
Fun.
It looks good.
I remember that.
Compared to my work and then
Different stages. But it's a cool show.
It's a good show.
It's a really nice show.
It's not their main center.
It's at the Belger Art Center, so that is at the Walnut location. And then the Belger Crane Yard is at Tracy location. They're about a half a mile apart.
And that's where your studio is, correct?
Correct. My studio is there in that complex. It's a good place to be. Okay.
So a lot of you probably don't know that. Well, some of you probably do. Meredith has a whole nother second body of work.
It's true.
So she has two bodies of work. She has one that nobody really knows about.
Well, it's a different crowd that knows about it.
Well, talk about it, because it's completely,
yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, okay, so my other line, which I call my commercial or retail line, versus this work with the dots, the series I call ... that would be Meredith Host Ceramics. It's weird to talk in the third person, but that's what it is. And the other one, the commercial retail line, is called Folded Pigs Dinnerware. And it's essentially restaurant ware, so already pre-glazed, pre-made dishes that then I decal with a set line of designs and then refire. And so it's an anatomical theme, it's kind of vintage medical drawing-esque. For me, it's a different price point, it's a different market. It allows me to be in the studio full-time, and I have been, in the fall, it'll be 8 years. Oh, thank you. So for me, it's a way of diversifying, and I don't have, I don't have a teaching job other than doing some workshops here and there. And my goal always has been to work in the studio and be able to just do that. And so Folded Pigs helps me do that. And I take it to craft shows, like indie craft fair circuit. Is that me or you?
I
That's
don't know.
you making noise. But and it's just been a great way of supplementing my income, but still, something I do with ceramics, just a different line. It's a completely different line.
And I think that's why I like it. It's completely, it's completely different.
And I wholesale to boutique sort of stores and things like that. Let's see. Hey, Josh, can I steal back that turquoise that I mixed up? Do you still need that? I can share it. Oh, thank you. That's cool.
So right now I'm going to try to throw just a round
that's all
sphere
Eric,
shape.
so-
This is one of my favorite shapes with
I
the
don't
bottle.
know.
Some of you have seen me do this little trick. But if you're new and haven't seen this, I'll demonstrate it. So I'm going to throw a cylinder and try to stretch it as far as I can. So that's where I'm at. Trying to get stuff so you're flying through my pieces, so I'm going to have to try to keep on throwing.
There's a lot of layers that are going to happen. I'm just talking a lot.
And if you guys,
yakking.
do any of you guys have questions that can go on live feed?
No pressure.
Yeah. And this chair feels, I feel like I'm like riding a horse.
It's like a bucking bronco.
I'm a farm boy, but I've never thrown a pot. Wow. Riding a horse.
While riding. I'm going to mix up some of the thicker underglaze with stuff that was just straight out of the container. This is actually not a color that, I guess it's not straight out of the container. It's two together. So I really like the turquoise blue, and this is a test tile of what it looks like straight from the bottle. And it's more of a blue turquoise, and I like a green turquoise also. So this is the turquoise, the green version that I mix up, and I just add chartreuse, some of the chartreuse underglaze to the turquoise blue underglaze, so that, little changes here and there. You can make a whole different color palette pretty easily. And I have a lot of these restaurant containers that I use so that I can still seal them and then keep everything. And in my studio, I have pretty much, you just couldn't do it.
I'm just going to fall off.
I have, 2 containers of each color. One is brushable color and the other is screen printing, so thinner and thick. So in a pinch, this is how I would mix up some screening underglaze. And so I just start with just a little bit of underglaze, and then I have some CMC gum, which is just this white powdery stuff here. This is actually a Mako product. They call it Silkscreen Medium. I'm pretty sure it's just a different grade of CMC. It works the exact same way. So I just sprinkle a little bit of this on the top of the underglaze, and it'll start, all those little granules will start to expand and become gummy. And actually, this is where I need my palette knife. And so, even now I can see the surface is changing. It's a little subtle for the distance, but it starts to thicken it up. And CMC is added to a lot of glazes for brushability and like suspension and stuff. This will take a second too. So I want to grind up all those little gummy granules, have them be, not lumpy in there. And I think I add a little bit at a time. I don't want to over CMC it, because if you put too much in, it instantly is thick and it works just great. But sometimes in the bisque firing, or even before you put it in the bisque, the underglaze will peel off, like it had just too much. It's like oversaturated. All right, this will just take me a second to get going. When I dry them out on their own, I'll just take
What?
the lid off and let it sit
Yeah.
out for a while. Check it on every once in a while. What? Oh, what was? Oh, so now it's just me. That's okay.
Maybe if you need to say something, Josh can put
All right, so already this is getting thicker, which is good. I'm going to add a little bit more, just a tiny bit. And when I'm screen printing, I screen print on leather hard work. You can also do it on bisqueware. I just find the cleanup much easier on greenware, so I can just scrape off the surface, which you can't really do very easily on the bisqueware. And most of all my decorating happens before the bisque firing, other than the decals. So my glazing's actually rather easy. It's just clear, or white if it's a liner glaze. Okay. So this is still a little more liquidy than, say, that pasty one that I used before, but I'm going to go for it. Oops. I just blobbed it on there. Okay. What are you throwing now? A round sphere? Woo! I almost toppled it over. Just a slightly different color. Sorry. It's coming along. I'm not sure yet. Maybe another one. Oh yeah, that's happening. Yeah, I gotta decorate down here too. I have a hard time leaving anything blank. Well, on that note, yes, there are. Okay. All right. Now your mic won't pick that up. To clean up any little unwanted parts of the screen print, I use this dental tool that I called for a long time. I didn't know what it officially was called, but I called it the scrapey tool because I scrape the clay. And then I was informed by a dentist who took a workshop of mine. He's like, do you want to know what it actually is called? I'm like, well, it's not the scrapey tool. So he'd know, it's a wax spatula. So now I actually call it the wax spatula. It's my favorite. It has 2 different points, and they're pretty thin, and it's great for just being able to scrape off little areas of the greenware. So there's a few dots that, with my finger, it's not as precise, as it could be. So I pressed down just slightly, and so that pushed some of the underglaze into, unwanted parts. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean it up by lightly scraping the surface.
Is it easier to do it now or when it's bone dry?
It's easier to do it now, because then I can rib afterwards and all that. Oh, I forgot to take a picture.
Also with this heat gun, they make different sizes. So they make ones that are smaller than this that have a little hook that you can clean and stuff like that. I would suggest not to keep getting those. Don't get the digital ones too. Those are the ones you can plug in. Be careful, because in grad school I had the ones that hang like this. There's heat sending that and that top of my head. So I've had this one for 8 years.
Really?
This is only my second one, so I cleaned up the first one that I had for a long time, and True Value actually took it back. We could do that too. Yeah.
2-year warranty?
He went through his pretty fast though.
You just trade it out every 2 years?
Something cool with the torch is you can see like the steam come off. Heat gun is just like,
It's not as dramatic.
I'm not one for the dramatic. My dramatic is when I raccoon.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, but if I haven't done it for a long time, I kind of forget steps when I'm doing it.
Uh-oh. Yeah?
I'm going to keep on stretching this. I try to work from the bottom. Sometimes I work from the middle up. What I do not want is, I don't want a sharp point. Any kind of sharp point is fine. So if I do want a sharp point, I can at the very last edge, I want to push it down or stuff like that. So right now I'm going to really work from this bottom to about halfway. And I have so many, as you guys can tell, I have every mud tool you can think of. I use them, I love them. The reason I don't use the metal ribs, and I take this to students, I tell them to throw them away. The ceramic kits are usually, they say they're for throwing in team building, but say you use this metal rib and you use it as dropping clay, you just sharpen this left and right. So I've had to get caught come around, I've seen people like almost cut their fingers off and stuff like that. So that's why the metal ribs work great, but I prefer using the mud tool one.
I love using the metal rib. And the only mud tool one I use is the red one. This one's my favorite. I decal with this also. It's my squeegee. I have seen a metal rib cut before, and whew.
Not one for blood.
I can do blood if it's fake in a movie.
This one's just a small metal rib, yeah. They have this size, this is the 0 size in these, but I let my students use them. Half my tools disappear every semester. So, a lot of kids, I just say, a lot of college kids get the credit cards in the mail, just trace this and cut it out, or hotel keys. Josh and I used to go to Josh at collegiate soccer. He'd walk around to everybody after his soccer trip and ask for the hotel keys.
Oh, really? That's a good. I do have a bunch of old credit cards in my studio that I haven't cut. But if there was ever a time when I need it, I know where they are.
I bet I'm on one I actually used. I'm like, I just
Was
needed
it?
Stop
desperate. So it was
Every time I look at it, I'm like,
killing two birds.
I paid you off.
Okay. It's not going to look that much different, but I did clean up just little bits here and there. Okay, let's see. Now what? Well, I think I am gonna stencil a little bit on this one first before I go to a next one. You're gonna attempt to that? Okay. So I use a stenciling method on leather hard where that's just paper stenciling, and it is I think my favorite way of decorating currently, because it's just so easy. And so basically everything I do is based on this dot, the circle. You know, all those paper towel patterns are based on all of that as well, mainly. So I use like larger dots or the polka dot to decorate with that all kind of fits within the same theme for me because of that shape. So when I first started using paper stencils, I was hand cutting, you know, or X-Acto knifing out circles, and then I realized that there was this product in this like scrapbooking aisle that are paper punches, and I'm like, wow, work smarter, not harder, right? So luckily I didn't hand cut them too long, for too long before I discovered these. So I have all the circles in pretty much any size that they come in, up to, you know, like a larger sort of hole punch. This is maybe 3.5 inches, I think. I think they have a big 4-inch one. I mean, it starts getting to be these gigantic lever things. But I just get them at Michael's, and I get my 40% off coupons every time because I refuse to pay full price for anything these days. It's true. Yeah. You do? Oh, I don't care. There's a lot of fun tools there. It just feels weird. Aha. Well, I go to town on the scrapbooking area with all the fun punches and things like that. So I just use copy paper. I know people use newsprint and stuff, but for newsprint for me, I feel like it gets too mushy because I'm going to soak it in water and then put it on the clay surface. And because this is still leather hard, you know, it's going to grab onto the paper because of the moisture. So this will not work on bisqueware because, you know, the water will absorb into the bisque and the paper's just going to pop off. So the difference if you use this type of stenciling on bisqueware, you would use a vinyl sticker or something like that, or tape. But I like to do everything in this leather hard state so that I can easily clean it up before the firing. I have found that punching out 3 sheets at a time works best, and it might be the age of my punches, but they're also meant to punch like cardstock and stuff, so thinner paper sometimes can get gummed up around the edge and it can get tattery, so I find that 3 sheets is pretty good. This is just straight up copy paper, but I also have been known to punch up junk mail, things, you know, just basically a form of recycling, really. Or if I printed out extra copies of something and then realized I didn't actually need all of them, they just go into the scrap pile in my studio, and then it eventually gets punched out or used for decorating. And so I find that the copy paper does have a decent amount of fiber in it, and that comes in handy when I'm trying to pick it off of the piece once I've coated with, coated with underglaze. I get a little violent with the punch, so I'm going to get off of the table when I do that because I don't want to screw up anything. But you have to get kind of like, it's good frustration, you know, take it out on it. And that like crisp, hard punch actually gets a really nice cut from them. I'll just make this the punching station down here. So bring those back. I'm gonna get a couple different sizes going. 3 sheets. I also, so I save the insides, you know, like things that are actually punched out, and then also the outsides. So depending on if you want the positive or negative, you'd use one or the other. Oop. Sorry, that's what you have to do. My punch is stuck. Really is stuck. This one is, yeah, totally gummed up. Okay, we'll use this punch, get a different size. This one's staying on here for right now. Just cut it out. Yes, please. Hold on, I'll hand it over. Yeah. Yeah, try it with your hand. I mean, it didn't work. So, all right, so I have a couple, let me get a little more, a couple of the smaller ones. There are different types of punches also. Here's more of a handheld one. This is my most used size. I think it's like 1.5 inches. And they were out of this type of punch when I needed it desperately. And I have to say, this is not my favorite. I prefer the lever punches. And part of it is because it only lets you stick the paper in so far. And I only get this much of a edge. So for using this and making a positive, dot, this doesn't give you much leeway as far as masking off. So that's my one beef with this type of, did you get it? Yep. Sweet, thank you. Oh, it really picks up on the mic. Okay, some of those too. I'll see. Okay. So once I have these punched out, I put them in some clean water, and you don't want it to be hot water because that breaks down the paper fibers really quickly to the point where it makes it all mushy, and you want like a crisp edge. So lukewarm's okay to like room temperature is probably the best. You can leave them in there, or I usually take them out and just set them on the table. And I'll have a pile of these ready to go. It's just easier to see them when they're not floating in a bucket. So this is pretty well saturated. And I can lay it right down on the surface. I'll have to pick a spot. First one's the hardest. How I decorate is usually put one thing down and then respond to that, and then respond to that. And then how do I balance it out? So that first step of each layer, it's like, it feels like the big, the big decision. You're waiting? Pressure. There it is. I'm not sure. But the nice thing about the paper stencils is that I can easily just take that off of there if I decide, nope, that's not the right spot. I am just going to stay in this banded area. Like I'm not going to go into this zone yet, I
No.
don't think. I might later, we'll see. So the fact that this is hanging off of there, I'm just gonna paint the underglaze in this top area.
The reason I did 2 in each kind is you get one too, you know that. After I get done,
I get to keep one. Awesome.
after I pick out which one I like.
Oh, I see how it is. That's fair.
So what I did is I have my mic on now since the wheel. I'm gonna shut it off so we don't get any static. So as I threw this, you guys can see I could stretch it pretty good. It's probably about 1/8 of an inch thick in certain areas. I started about 1/2 inch. I think that's what problem students try to throw a thin cylinder and then they try to stretch it. And you can only stretch it so much so far. And what I like about, I mean, a lot of you guys have seen me do this. Students love when I do this. But like in it, clay can blow up. Like you can put your mouth on it. Like say this has a dent in it, I can blow it up and get perfectly round. So say this is flat, like I have this. We're gonna do a little ocean sound for a second. Say this is flat, and I don't want it flat. Don't get me wrong, some of them flat are beautiful. Don't take it that I don't like that. I can just put my mouth over it and
Ooh.
somebody, when I first started doing this, like, oh, you have to put a piece of clay in your mouth, and then when you blow it up, you have to spit it in there and stuff. No, you don't have to.
Wait, what?
Like, you have to put a clay ball, and when I'm blowing it up, you have to spit it in there. I'm like, to hold the air. So once I get this, so sometimes I would throw them and just close this completely. Because once you have, if I put a plug over that, it won't collapse. It's trapped air in there. Okay? So, but if you have to have some kind of hole somewhere, otherwise it'll blow up. So, so I can play around, I can sit down and play around, lay it down. If I don't like it, I'll just put my mouth on it and blow it back up and keep on playing around with it that way. And when I start shaping these, I like to get down eye level with it. So I'll push my chair away so I can exactly see what it's going to be. And when I trim these, I trim them so the foot, if there's some kind of design up here, like a break, that design is exactly if I take a line straight down to the foot. So to me, that's a good golden rule. In grad school, there's talk about a perfect proportion of a pot. How far the lip's supposed to be out to the neck, to the shoulder. And if you guys want to see that, I can draw it on a board later or something like that. But there is a perfect proportion to like a Greek-Roman vase. That's why you see them in all of Michael's and all of these shops. They're the exact same shape, just because it's the most elegant. So I'll play around with this one some more. Nope. As long as there's trapped air in there, you just, like, I put it in. If it's done, then I just poke a hole on the foot or something. I mean, it depends what the function is. But, you know, with raku, you're not going to eat, I mean, like, she's making work that I can actually use functional and stuff like that. I can trick out. And raku gets a bad rep because, I mean, it is the firing process. It's not functional. It's mostly decorative. If you do copper matte raku, like the flashing, everybody loves like the flashing colors and all of that. But no, through time it'll change. So it'll reoxidize due to sunlight. And 5 years later, your beautiful pot will turn brown and orange and stuff like that. So that's why I choose not to do the copper matte. I just do a white crackle and then do mason stains or just some basic general colors that I like. I have started playing around with velvet underglazes because there are so many different colors. So some of those there's like rolled texture. It's like the blue one around the circle, that square. You can see the baby blue. That's just a baby blue underglaze that I paint in there after it's bisque fired. And I just stick it under this sink and use a sponge, and the glaze just stays into the designs. And I have little rollers that I'll show you. That's how I do those. A little trick. I use little tools that I have a lot of tools. I would say I don't use, well,
Like half of them? I don't know. If I had to boil down, I would probably use 4 tools the most out of hundreds. I want to quickly show you guys. I decided to mask off the pierced part because I thought, ooh, if I get a little crazy with the underglaze, that might be really difficult to clean. So I just cut some strips and masked it off. And before I actually start layering or applying the underglaze, I want to make sure that the paper is really adhered. If there is, any area that's kind of picking up, that will allow the underglaze to flow under. So I just damp sponge, it's really not that wet, dab around the edge and make sure it's adhered. And then I mixed up a gray color, and I just used the jet black with white. There is a gray pre-made, but I prefer this gray. And then you can do different shades of it. A little bit of black goes a long way. So this looks pretty light, but it's actually kind of going to be dark when it's fired. Jet black. Depending on which black you use, you'll have a different type of result. I had a surprise one day where I thought I was underglazing gray. I mixed up a new batch, and I opened up the glaze kiln, and all of a sudden I had navy blue everywhere, and I thought, what happened? And then I realized I used a different black, so there must have been cobalt in it. And and now I'm like, well, hey, now I have navy blue, which is cool. Luckily it all worked, but it was not what I was going for. So it was quite a surprise. And then a happy accident, and it worked out. But now I'm very careful about also labeling, say this one is indeed gray, and then the navy will look identical because it's mixed with just a different black, but it's gonna look, in the wet form exactly the same. So labeling works out well. And when I apply the underglaze, I do back and forth brush strokes. Because of the edges of the paper as well as the raised up screen print area, if I just did one kind of swoosh with it, it kind of catches on all those little edges and creates these little pockets. And so the back and forth helps fill it in. Also, if I'm brushing over some screen printed area on that first layer, I use my finger and just press it into all those little edge areas. And it doesn't affect the print underneath. I'm usually asked that, and I don't really have a problem with it mushing or, blurring it. What can happen is if I sponge too much over the top of a screen print, then that will affect it a little bit. And depending on the color that I put over the screen print, it'll cover it up or it'll let a little, show through. So this will be probably pretty covered, being a darker gray. But what I usually do after the glaze firing, I'll redefine that pattern with a different color decal over the top so that it's like an under-over kind of pattern thing that's happening. So this is just the first layer, gray. I do 3 coats because I want it to be opaque. You could stop here. It may be a little more translucent. You might have some brush strokes that show. Second layer, a little less brush strokes, a little more opaque, and I feel like 3 coats is pretty good if you want it totally opaque. Any thicker than that, and there's this possibility of it crawling, it will pull on itself in the glaze firing. So I am cautious to not put too much on. If I have a bunch of these in a row, like say I'm working on a series of 8 plates or something, that's typically about the number I would work on at the same time. I'll have them lined up on the table, and by the time I'm at like maybe the 4th one, the first one's ready for its 2nd coat. I kind of work back and forth that way. And I definitely want to wait for all the sheen to go away so that it's just a satin color when you do the next coat. Because if I were to go ahead and just do the 2nd coat right now, I'm actually almost taking off what I did, even though it doesn't look like it. So patience is key here. Yet it's hard for me sometimes, especially when there's just one thing in front of me, which is why I'm gonna go grab another one. And also what I do is when I have so many that I'm working on the bat that it's sitting on, I'll mark like with that underglaze. I'll just put like a dash, like that's one coat. And then like on the second, but then I go again, I'll put another hash mark. So I'm like, okay, that definitely has two, because there have been times where I'm like, I can't remember where I left off. Usually you can tell the first coat, but once you get in the second and third, it all kind of looks the same. Okay, I'm gonna take a picture of this and then grab another one, because I'm gonna do each part in photo.
So sometimes I just don't like them. Like the tops is what I want to do. But so what I did is I just chopped the top off, and sometimes I love laying these down because I can now pierce a design in here and have a lid that can go over it that can reflect or do different piercings. So I do play around with them. Again, they're not functional. So no, but when I was laying down, I was pretty much holding my breath. Just sometimes potters feel like they try to do things too fast, like they just want to, and then it starts getting that wobble. I mean, it has to do that whole rotation. The clay has to do it. So if you take your time, it'll work itself out. Okay. So I usually let stuff. You want to lift that up, that center part up, and get what's under there. There should be a clear bag of rollers. Maybe they're out front.
While you're looking down here, can we say hi to our people that are watching the live stream from Dodge City and from Branson, Missouri?
Hello.
Hey Dodge, hey Branson.
Yeah.
That's how you do a shout out.
Shout out.
So now you know who to ask next time.
Right. So I grabbed one of the porcelain ones instead of the raku, just to switch it up. So you can see the clay color difference. Am I allowed to sponge this one?
Yeah, I have no. Like I've
You're like, I don't use this clay. I don't know.
I definitely.
This is probably closer to the clay I use, so I'm gonna sponge.
I definitely needed to walk away after that day and just be like, I don't work with this clay.
A little bit of frustration.
I mean, it is different going from a clay that I know what I can do to a porcelain clay body that, I like adding water. It gets tacky and sticky, and I'm like, okay, does it stretch? And then, I came down. I started throwing Tuesday. So those were done Tuesday, pierced yesterday or the day before. So when I throw my pieces, I let them sit for a week under a trash bag before I even start trimming and doing anything. What you guys didn't see is when I cut the pieces, I leave all the pieces inside. Like I don't push them out immediately. It keeps the structure. So if you're doing a tall vase, I've learned before that I push when I pierce on big pieces, I flip them upside down and do the bottom first. And I used to push them all the way through. Well, they're going inside, sticking to the top. When I flip it over, it collapses because it adds all the weight. Or if they're heavy on one side, I've had them jump off the table. So I leave all the pieces in. I do a test. If I cut one piece out and I use the back of a needle tool and push it through, if it doesn't push through, then it's too tacky. So just wait. And what? Am I off? Am I on?
You're on.
When I this isn't in the article. When I pierce my pieces, I wrap a trash bag over them and cut a little window, and then that's how I pierce so they don't dry out. So that's the whole little trick. And if they are tacky and I need to get them done, I dip my X-Acto blade in WD-40. WD-40 will never dry. So then I can just push them through.
That's a good little
That's the farmer in me.
tip.
So, and this is just, again, these are just these little tools that they have different textures and designs. That they have a whole bunch of them out front. But as an artist, I just felt like I needed to do something more to my work. And there's a big change coming. I'm not posting it yet, but there's a lot of new work coming that doesn't look, it still has the piercing, but there's a lot more different colors. And I don't know when I'll show that.
Top secret for now.
Everybody has those times where you're like,
I'm not ready yet to put this out into the world.
It's killing me because I am a social media person where I post something and I'm like, hey, what do you guys think of this? Now I'm just like, so. And when I do this, I don't let the wheel do it because then I start overlapping. It goes too fast and everything. So I usually just do it by hand or go really slow. So just by doing that, it does a little design that I can actually add color to. So with any raku, you can do like what Meredith's doing. You can put velvet underglazes under everything before it's bisque fired, and then you can just put a clear crackle and you have all of your colors already. So there's so many raku glazes out there that I use. I use Spectrum raku glazes. That's all I use. But if you have a clear crackle, you can just use mason stains and make your own. But I know how velvets work. They work pretty good.
Yeah, they're ready to go.
They're ready to go. And the colors, you know. I don't do commission pieces because I don't want people to like, did somebody ask you like, no, that was Sunshine Cobb. Somebody asked her for a pink mug and she does not do pink. She
I could do that.
hates pink. And somebody even sent her that glaze, like, please do it in this glaze. She's like, no. So I think I'm going to do a pink mug and send it to her. And if we have that kind of, if she's listening.
I think there's a time
to
and place for pink.
I think she's listening too. I told her to listen.
Hey, Sunshine.
Hey, Sunshine.
Sunshine and I are on a panel at NCECA together.
Does everybody know what NCECA is? You gotta talk about it.
Me? The
You're
panel?
on the
Oh, I
panel.
thought you meant NCECA. Like, I have to explain. The panel is about kind of more of the business of art making and entrepreneur type stuff. So it's me, Sunshine Cobb, and Kristen Kiefer, and our panel moderator is Kayla Stein. I think it's going to be pretty great. So we're going to talk. We all kind of go about things a little bit differently and how we survive, I guess. You know, me, I will talk about my commercial retail line a little bit, as well as, you know, just like studio practice and how we make it work.
Is this going to be a podcast?
You know, eventually it probably will be, but it's going to be an NCECA panel, so during the conference. There's a presentation, you know, well, it's a panel,
you can
but
sign up. You can sign up for the whole. It's on NCECA.org, and then you can sign up for days. So that has the whole schedule of what's happening per day. So you can get day passes, and it's taking place in Kansas City this year.
yeah, it's March 16th through 19th, and I'm pretty sure my panel is on Thursday.
But there's so many galleries.
There's
There's galleries for days and days.
Yeah.
Registration prices for NCECA go up on the 27th. Right now, you can see for birds it's cheaper.
Ooh, jump on it.
Yeah, I think it's like
November 27th and 29th it goes up.
Of January?
Not January.
yeah.
That is true.
She'll answer any.
You can answer all in.
Because there's going to be a pre-workshop here. There's 3 artists that are going to be here working, and then there's also going to be a show here. I mean, there's a lot. The week before, it goes from Kansas City to Lawrence, so there's all those activities going everywhere. Like Lawrence Art Center has a whole bunch. KU's doing a whole bunch. So it's basically a week long of 7,000 ceramic artists,
Gonna be
students
awesome.
to faculty to mentors and things like that. Might be. It's our 50th anniversary, the 50th anniversary too. So, do you guys want to see one more piece thrown, or do you guys want me to play? Go ahead.
Can you speak to coloring in, like you said?
The coloring.
Color.
Oh, coloring in. So bottlenecking in. With ceramics, we know that it's easy to open a piece. It's harder to close it. I was always taught to use 6 points of pressure. So if you take your fingers and do something like that, this is touching, and this is touching. So if you do it, you have six touching points on it. You can't do that with larger pieces. You just have to use your hands and close it in. But as you guys kept on seeing me do, I would close it in, pull it up, cut it off, pull it up. If it's too thick, it's just going to twist. So if you guys do like wine goblets or some kind of functional teapots, the little spirals for the teapots, sometimes there's cracking on the interior. That's from not compressing. That's just from just doing the outside. So what I didn't show you is there's a little trick you can do. You can put a paintbrush, dip a paintbrush in water. If the hole's small enough, put the paintbrush down in it, and then you just close it. So that paintbrush on the interior holds as like your finger, so it compresses the interior. So you can make them extremely, really thin too if you want. So, is that answering? It takes some practice. Water, I use a lot of water on that. If it starts, and you guys saw me like clean it up with the needle tool. I usually wait till it's leather hard so I get that nice clean cut, because like a lot of students, they'll try to cut it off and they just ruin it. It just bends the whole piece. So, we have 40 minutes. Well, we have longer. We're going to take a little break. I mean, just like use restroom or something like that. Is this the one you want me to do?
Yeah. He's nervous about it. So this is an oval vase that is cast, so it's slip cast, and it's a cone 6 porcelain. It's a really white clay body. I've never tried to really pierce it or anything, so I have a feeling it's not going to be super forgiving. But we're going to give it a go. But you're also going to do resist stuff, so it's going to give it.
So like a casting slip has Darvan in it. So Darvan dries really fast. So once even with a little bag in the open air, it's going to dry pretty fast. So it's going to be almost chalky. So when I'm cutting it, it's going to be to the consistency of chocolate. We're going to try it. Since it is oval, it's going to be hard to put a grid on.
Yeah.
So, so I have Anne that works here, Dr. Anne, has made these designs on Photoshop. So this is my piece looking from an aerial view. So this is just on a copy machine. And if you take velvet underglaze and paint on the black, it will slowly disappear. So where the white is, it makes it, I can't paint this good. So there's no tricks, there's no special tricks to it. It's just copy paper. You carefully paint on that and let it dry. Do not use a heat gun. If you use a heat gun, it cracks the underglaze, and when you transfer it, it shows the cracks. So this one is painted white.
Which on the really white clay body, we're not sure if it's going to show.
The reason why I painted it white is because if I mess up, so if you're not going to see it. And the reason we're going to do this is I'm going to transfer this on there, and then instead of doing my grid for my piercings, which I have a piece over here that I'll pierce later, is I'm just going to freehand pierce these. So this will give me my idea. So if you have an elaborate design that you're like, I don't know how to transfer that onto my piece, this is another way of doing it. And it's cheap. So, not saying it's going to work.
I'm punching out some smaller circles. And I was going to do, I think, a little polka dot sort of grid just in this one isolated area here. So I'm basically using the positive of the cutout to create a negative. So the clay will be a white dot, and then it will have a field of color around it. Welcome to the table.
You really used up the space. Wow.
I did tell you I was gonna. This happens in my studio too, where I box myself into like one little area where the rest is all messy. Actually, we need a second coat on here. I can see that it's dry.
Feels like I got a present.
Unwrap it. Where's my mark?
So this is the form I'm going to be working with. Maybe.
Maybe. You'll
The
try
form-
it. See what happens.
Did I bring any foam, Julie?
Foam.
Do you have like a foam or any kind of soft padding? And
Oh, wait. I do. It was in this bin. Will this work?
yes, perfect. So I have foam laying around the studio. There's some nice places you can go buy really 4-inch thick foam. And then what I usually try to do is wrap it. If I use different clay bodies, red, white, earthenware, I just put a trash bag over it. So, thanks.
So you're transferring that first? Is that how it's happening?
Is the mic still making noise?
I think it is. Or it's me.
Or we're too close? I don't know. If that noise on the mic is bothering you, just let me know. I'll shut mine off.
This will just take me a second to place. Yeah, yours is the loud one. Does that mean you're offline?
Cut. Actually, let's try these smaller ones. So with these also, I'm in the process of, I can ship these off to a company to do decals, and they're going to do them in 22 karat gold.
Ooh.
So, and why the gold, when I raccoon decals, so raccoon decals isn't really something that's been done yet. I'm not going to tell you how I do it yet, because I haven't perfected it. But
Turn your mic back on.
nope.
Talk out.
I mean, if you think of, if you know raccoon, I'll turn it on.
Thank you.
I'm giving you, you guys haven't seen my designs yet, but I'm giving you my head. So, decals are low fire, like beyond low fire. They're around 1600 degrees, depending on what decal you use.
It could be like 1300.
1300 degrees. And there's different forms of them. So Meredith uses this, like the bright red ones or the black ones for the circular. I feel if I was to introduce that to a flame, they would just burn out. So what I've been doing is playing around with how high can I take metallic decals, the 22 karat gold ones, before they burn out. So to introduce them on Raku, nobody's writing this down, are they? No. I fire my piece to 0.7 and then don't even pull it out. So I have all my Raku glazes already on there. It looks really ugly when I open the kiln. And then I put my decals on, and then I fire it all the way back to 1600 degrees, and then I Raku it. So that's how I do the Raku over the decals.
Weird. Crazy.
It works. Huh? They do. Well, with Raku, if you know Raku, like so many people want to pull their pieces out at 1800 degrees. Like I let mine cool all the way down to 1400 before I can pull them out. It doesn't ruin your gloves. You can blow on them. You can do designs on them. There's a lot of little tricks for Raku. I do know that after doing a metallic decal, that they adhere to your piece so tight that if you try to Raku fire it a second time, it will just crack your piece.
Oh, really?
Because I've tried Rakuing it several times. And so we have this. Are we really putting this one on?
Do it.
I don't know why we're still going, but so we have this piece. Josh painted it. It's crinkly. What I'm going to do is, since this is a little bit, dry, I'm just going to get it wet, and then I'm going to put this on top of it. It's kind of like a tattoo that you would put on your body, and then when we pull this off, it will hopefully work. I'm gonna unmic.
Okay. I'm almost done placing these stencils.
Over there.
Yeah, you want clean water or clay water?
Just whatever.
I'll give you the
I
clay
pulled my
water.
sponge.
I also need that. one more.
Well, since we're not, so I'm not gonna try to pierce this.
No, that's crazy small.
So when, about design, I'm gonna put that at the lip, because I'm not gonna pierce the lip.
So he just went in and painted the white area?
Yep, I have, yeah. I don't know where the positive negative. So when you print it out, what you can do is you can print it out, and then if you have a copy machine, go to image edit, and you can do a black-white reversal. You need the toner. So if you do it on just a printing machine, like just from your printer, it won't work. A copy machine. Okay.
I finished the dot grid inside down there. And now picking the color. I think I'm gonna just go with the theme of the apron, since I already have the orange dots. Maybe do another orange round. Use bright orange. Huh? Oh. What was that? I use these brushes, I think called like a hake brush or something. These are my absolute favorite. I apply all my underglaze with them as well as glaze. They hold a lot of material, and they're soft so they don't leave as many brush strokes. And brush strokes are fine, but they're not my thing. I don't want to see them. So
Velvets are known for brush strokes.
velvets are known for brush strokes?
You can do little coats.
Well, because you can be kind of more painterly with velvets also, and kind of like watercolor washes if that's what you choose. Like there are so many different ways of using them. But like I said earlier, I kind of like a solid opaque color. So this is the bright orange. And these brushes do hold a decent amount of material, which is great. So it's not like just one stroke and you have to reload. And once again, I'm gonna go back and forth to catch all those little edge lines of the paper.
So as you can see, I've adhered this piece to it. You can see how the actual pattern comes through on the paper. So I don't want to drench the paper in water because you're just going to pull off the paper pulp. So pretty simple. It worked.
It worked?
I'm out.
That looks good.
And sometimes if you just burnish it too much, this black will transfer onto it too. You have to get that off. That is toner. It has cobalt in it. It will just fire black and everything like that. So just little.
One coat of the orange. Cool. That's exciting that it worked.
Huh? Yeah, man.
Sorry? Well, once I have two more layers of the orange, I'm gonna pick off of the paper stencils. So they're still on there. They're just encased in underglaze right now. And then once I take them off, it's basically just exposing the clay. So the clay will be a white polka dot in an orange field. Okay, maybe I can I'm gonna do some bigger dot stencils, I think, around, because I try to get as much on at one time. So if I can isolate one area with one color, I can still work around with other. I just have to be a little cautious and not drip other colors in. But I think we can do that. Let's give it a go. So is this the one that you think you're gonna attempt?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Did you talk about how you're gonna find those dots or put on the coat?
I think I want to make sure that it dries, right? So that if it's still shiny and glossy, I want to wait till it gets rid of that. I want it more of like a satin surface. If you pick them off too soon, like you're risking the paper being heavy and falling into like a part that you don't, messing with the surface essentially. If I wait till it's like totally dry, you can see the paper a little bit more easily. However, I have found when taking off the paper when it's totally dry, it tatters the edge a bit. So there's this happy place of exactly when you can pick them off. Also, the paper is absorbing water, and so they need a little time to dry and chill out and separate themselves from the clay surface. There'll be times where I try to pick them off and they're already, still sticking. Then I know it's time to wait a little bit longer before I take them off. I can get, depending on like the timing, I use an X-Acto blade, and I'll do this later, but there's something very satisfying when I can like just kind of go crazy and pick, and then just dots are flying everywhere. It's fun.
I was not watching carefully enough. Did you wet the surface?
Yeah, I had to wet the surface, and it helps the paper adhere, like tack to it. So now I'm right here at this stage. If honestly, I could probably just start piercing through the paper if I wanted to get the designs I want. The only thing with this pattern is it's not exactly what I pierce. It's similar, but I don't go point to point on my piercings, and I'm going to talk about that after lunch of how I exactly, because if I went point to point, they would just crack. Yeah. They would just fall apart. So there's a way I go about fixing that. So it's going to be interesting. And
You can do it.
yeah. So we'll pull this off. And again, if it's not, what's good about these is like I'm one that like I love this clean cut pattern, but in the greenware, the bone dry stage, I take a Scotch-Brite pad and scrub over it, so it kind of scrapes it, scratches it, makes it antique looking. So I do that. It adds some depth to it. So this, I don't mind if it doesn't come out completely clean, because I can see some of the underglaze is sticking to my pattern, especially down here. You could just try to get it wet and try to get some of that off again.
I'm gonna cut some strips so that I can block off the piercing like I did on that first one.
And if it's not transferring on the clay, again, this is a casting slip clay body. Like when you add water to it, once it dries, so if the underglaze isn't adhering to it, that might be. It's not that you didn't burnish it enough. When did you cast these?
Yesterday.
So.
Well, yeah, Thursday and Friday. I usually can only do one a day in that mold for some reason. Meh. Oh yeah, the white kind of shows up. It's subtle.
It'll give me some fun ideas. So again, it didn't come out clean if I like it. So there are some areas.
I think we're both pretty particular when it comes to
We're
things.
pretty perfectionist. So now what I'm going to try to do is just free cut.
Freehand.
So I have no special tool. I use an X-Acto blade. That's all I use. It takes me about 8 cuts per diamond. So one piece of mine has 1,300 holes in it, and I'm cutting each piece 8 times. I can cut 1,300 holes in about 5 hours. So
Whew.
I don't know why I figured out the math one day.
Because it's a fun fact.
Then you're like, oh, I need a different. I'm gonna cut in between. I'm gonna cut out the diamonds.
So the white will remain.
I'm using
on
the
the
white.
piece.
I'm using the white as like a guideline, a grid.
Okay, I masked off some solid color dots.
That's what it will look like. And then why I use white is because if we don't like it, if the pattern didn't do it, we can just clean it off. But the piercing will still be there. So.
Smart. All right, before I layer any more underglaze on, I want to make sure once again that all the paper is tacked down and totally adhered to the surface. I think I'm gonna mix up a pink. It's gonna be really warm, color-wise. All right, since Eric likes pink. All right, I said before, like radiant red is my favorite red for pink mixing, and I'm just gonna use like that much. I don't have any sort of scientific way of mixing my colors. It's a lot by sight. You could be really precise about it, like 1 spoonful here of this, 2 of this color, and then you always know you'll have that exact same color. I feel like there's a little bit of chance. Oh, this is gonna be dark. A little bit of red goes a really long way. And pink, this one is one of the deceiving ones. Like sometimes, most of the time what you see is close to what you're gonna get when it comes to underglaze. This will be darker than I always anticipate. The gray also will usually be darker than I anticipate. And there's some greens out there, like the leaf green is always darker than I think it's gonna be. Well, maybe this is lighter than I want. I'm trying to think of which tone I'd like to give this. It's gonna be a bright piece, but how bright? I might add a tiny bit more. How is that going there?
It's just, you know, and I have days where I just pierce the whole day. So I try to I have a set goal where I'll be, if I'm doing bowls, I should be able to do 5 bowls in a day. I can get the bowls done in about an hour and a half.
Oh, okay. I thought I was still on that 5-hour deal.
No, I can get those
Okay.
done in about an hour and a half. Well, those about an hour. But when I do it, every 15 minutes or 30 minutes, my alarm goes off on my phone, so I can readjust my eyes.
Oh,
So I have a little eye chart I look at and
really? That's
stretch
cool.
my back. Because when I'm doing them always the whole day.
Do you use like magnifying glasses or anything like that?
No, I should. I don't want to be one of those like guys that has like the magnifying over the head, like I'm tying like fishing hooks.
I don't know, man, maybe.
For Christmas, my dad got me one of those lights that you put on your hat because I work. If I'm throwing and I'm in a good, like I can throw. Like today's the day I'm throwing and everything's going good. Like I'll spend 24 hours just throwing. But then I'm like, okay, I threw 30 pieces. It's gonna take me 2 weeks to pierce all of these. After throwing a piece, I can usually let it set, bundled up in a trash bag for about a month and a half and still pierce it.
Month and a half.
I don't do the cooler trick. I mean, the cooler trick's pretty good, like functional. But I just,
This is the first time I've ever brought a cooler anywhere. I just thought, oh, those will fit really nicely in there.
So keeping it in the styrofoam cooler, after we'll keep it leather hard.
What I do is I have a lot of plastic bins. So I basically make like a damp box and I pour, I don't know, at most a 1/2 inch of plaster in the bottom. And so it sets up, but I keep it wet. So I pour water in it if it dries out. And so you have this base floor that has this moisture dampness, and then I put pieces in there, and they'll stay for months.
a lot of people do it for handles. Handles, so they reach in and grab a handle.
So I have under all my tables a ton of these boxes. You just have to make sure they don't dry out. You know, I add water every once in a while if I'm like, ooh, that one's getting a little dry.
We have an old refrigerator.
Oh, those work really well. I've never personally used them, but I think I didn't wait long enough on this inside coat. I know that this particular bright orange really needs a solid 3 coats to be opaque, just from having used it before. And I think I maybe prematurely did the second coat. We'll see.
Eric, can I ask you a question about your drill?
Hmm?
Can I ask you a question about your drill? When you were ribbing on the outside, you were ribbing about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. When you were ribbing on the inside, you were ribbing at about 10 o'clock. Is there a reason for that?
No, it's just my eyesight. I mean, right here is in front of me, but back here I can really, I have a really bad lazy eye. So it's just, that's how I do it. There's not a correct, like, and that's what I tell. I throw what's comfortable to me. There's not, I might do completely wrong. So like if Meredith sat down and started throwing, there'd be a difference in how her style and how I throw. It's just what's comfortable for me, what I want it to do. There's a lot of potters, instead of like shaping that piece, like I shaped it, I didn't throw it, I shaped it. Well, let's actually throw that form. And I just think shaping is a lot easier for me because I can control the thickness and all that. Right? And
What's your definition?
I don't think I know that well. Something on, I don't really throw that well.
What?
I know. So I'm good at shapes I can do. When I push my limits, like, you know, I'm gonna start doing multiple pieces, multiple collections and bigger. I have a commission for a 4-foot tall pierce piece, double vessel.
Whew. Have fun.
I told him it's gonna take a couple years.
That's probably a good time frame.
So some of you have seen the pot inside the pot, correct? If you guys came the first time, there's an actual pot inside of a pot where I pierce the exterior, you see the pot inside the interior. Now I'm doing a pierce pot inside of a pot. So like when you look at it straight, it looks solid. When you look at it from an angle, you can see all the way through it. Inside, huh? And there's one back there. There's back there. But I mean, that's, to me, a clay is just clay. Josh can tell you about what I do the first semester.
What does he do the first semester?
Well, okay, so
Because I don't know.
he grabbed one of these and it was fired and everything, and he was kind of talking about how clay is just
Beautiful.
clay. And so he's holding that, he's talking about it, and he's like, yeah, it's just clay. And so he takes it to the edge of the table. Now there's an older piece. Takes it to the edge of the table, cracks it over the edge, breaks it, that's kind of it.
Aw.
I told him it was like killing a unicorn.
I've had students cry. I've had students get all the pieces at the end of the semester, come back and glue it all back together.
Some people did that, yeah.
That I would
So
not
I'm
have.
like, you know I'm just gonna throw this away, right? So I actually gave them a piece like, here you go, thank you for doing that. But I mean, that's what it is. First semester, I figure out, I find a piece. I broke one of these, and I just break it. If you've had my class before and you know I break it, I have the students walk over and just pick it up and throw it on the ground. Because it is just a piece of clay. If you throw one shape and you get the shape that you like, and you don't throw it again, what did you learn from that? You didn't learn anything. And that's, you know, so you can throw several, it's like pulling handles. You know, the theory is you have to pull 400 handles before you can get one good handle. I'm a raccoon potter, I don't do handles. So I went that safe route. How do you feel about handles?
They're not my favorite thing to do, but I don't mind them.
So when you pierce a piece that you put inside,
You wanna
there's
know how to do this?
not while it's here, but I was just gonna say that the piece that you have pierced is leather hard, and the piece that you're throwing is a different consistency. So do you have an issue with cracking at the top?
Nope.
So what's
Be-
the gimmick?
Is it this special clay
I mean,
body?
what's the, not gimmick?
No, it's, if I'm gonna do a pot inside of a pot like this, I'm going to, I mean, I throw at the same time, same way, I'll throw the pot, the outside pot to the inside pot. So the inside pot has no foot, so I throw it all the way to the wheel head. And then I measure the exterior pot down to the foot, so I know what that length is. So I have all the math done. On the exterior pot, I leave it open, so I don't close it all the way in. And the interior form is a bottle. So on the exterior form, I cut it in half. And flip and store this together, and then when I'm done, I throw the two lips together. I haven't had any problems with cracking. If it does crack right here, I do it like a trumpeter top. You know, those tops are like the nice elegant. You can just put that right over it. So I mean, there's
My clay would not allow for that.
well, I mean, it's like all the artists know. There's a lot of tricks. Like a lot of the work, a lot of it is there's some flaws in it. Like a lot of sculptures. How does that artist fix that? How do you know if there's a crack in it? Did that arm fall off? How do you know? So we're pretty good at repairing stuff.
I don't know. I'm like, cracked. It's a done.
Like I know if it cracked. People are like, oh, you don't know if it's a clear crackle. I can tell a crack from a clear crackle. And there's surface cracks, there's complete cracks. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of cracks to deal with. But that's how you throw the pot inside the pot. Pretty simple.
What I'm, it's totally simple. No big deal.
Demo that again.
You got to decorate. I want to see what happens with this. But what I'm doing right now is cutting out some of this underglaze tissue transfer. And so these are like some of my patterns. And this floral print is a print that I found on a paper towel roll when I was helping my boyfriend clean out his grandfather's like abandoned house. It had been empty of human presence, I don't know, for maybe 15, 20 years, but still full of possessions and belongings. And there was a full roll of this paper towel in the back of the kitchen cupboard. And I'm guesstimating it was like a late 80s, early 90s roll. And I'm obsessed with the print. So this is what this floral thing is. It's the first time that a print versus the like dot quilted pattern has intrigued me. So when I went to China, I went there fall of 2014. I was there for 3.5 months. I used this floral print as basically for most of the work that was based on this print that I started there. And so I had these underglaze tissue transfers made over there. There are ways of getting them made in the States now, and other, people do sell the tissue transfers. But I was lucky enough to be able to get my own patterns that I could use. So these are essentially just screen printed underglaze on this transfer paper. And it's a similar situation of transferring what Eric did, the underglaze on the printout, by wetting the back, kind of like a temporary tattoo type of deal. You can transfer these onto bisqueware. I still prefer leather hard. They can be transferred onto bone dry pieces too. In China, everything was decorated bone dry. So I wet the back and then let this dry, and I can peel it up, and this print will transfer onto the clay. So let me see what I want to do. All right, I'm going to actually cut up the pattern a bit, or the print, and use it in sections. Oh yeah, I gotta take a picture. I'm trying to do all those stages. Sometimes I'll just forget on one and like, oh no, I missed it. There it is. Okay. Once I get this on, I'll pick it up and show you.
So you guys can see how dry it is. I mean, it's just crumbles now. Clay body is drying pretty fast. What's good about this porcelain clay body is, ultimately I could pretty much set bone dry. It would just take a lot longer to get the scrapes. But if you're working with porcelain, bone dry, and all the flakes and stuff, I mean, it's pretty accurate.
How many blades do you ruin?
I go through a blade a piece. So,
I thought it would be more than that.
like, if you do raccoon and stuff like that, try some of that clay body. It doesn't have, like, if you guys come up here, it's smooth. I can pass them all of that out. And I've added a finer mesh of kyanite.
And that's still a secret.
Yep. That's the only secret I have these days.
So, just the beginning of, I wet the paper. So you have one secret, basically.
Yeah. I have one secret. I don't know.
But the clay is available, right? Today only?
Today, only today.
So if you get used to it, you're out of luck. There's a little bit of it.
Are they still making those packets? Are you guys doing packets of what they're using?
We're not making packets, but anything that they're using, we've got on special at 20% off.
Ooh.
So that all underglazes?
All underglazes are 20% off. The MKM
Tools by
tools,
today?
munching. Your clay is one price on it. Because I don't usually carry it, so it's that. It's not available to you. It's cost.
What are you charging for that?
Pardon?
Are you charging for the
Let me
record?
find out what that is, because I'll have to look at that one. Give me a minute, I'll find out. But I
22
know
I think it's like 22 cents a pound. It's cheap.
it's not expensive. No, it's well, it's Flint Hills clay, so it doesn't cost.
Sweet deal.
Yeah. But Sean Mud Tools.
To make cheap clay. So we're gonna work for another 15 minutes. Take
Okay.
A little break.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm just piecing together parts of this print around the inside, reaching out to the outside. I'm kind of thinking of it as the middle well area is like the ground, and then the flowers are coming out from there. Little garden. And then after I get all of the lines transferred, I'll go back and stencil probably some dots on top. I'm predictable. Circles, dots, all the time.
I like the combination, right? Because Stearns' work, like, he was my teacher, so I've kind of seen this work, and it's so solid, so rigid, and now he's getting polka dots.
Getting bedazzled.
I'm bedazzling, yeah. I'm glad he's okay with it. I don't know if I can use that piece yet.
So Eric, do you still use the graphic line tape in your design?
Yep. And I'll talk about that after lunch. But yeah, I still use that. And they have that here, which is pretty expensive here, 20% off. I still get it at MrArt.com. I still order it online. And what she's talking about is there's this 1/16 inch to 1/8 inch tape that graphic designers use. You can do perfect circles and it won't fold up.
Ooh,
Works
circles.
out good. So I do all my line work. So all those little lines. This is where that's when you know I'm too perfectionist. Is just to get one clean, crisp line all the way 3 down. Just pull off that middle one and paint it carefully.
They do have that tape that has like 3 that you lay at once.
I know. I want that.
Have you tried it?
Not yet.
Ah,
I make my students use painter's tape and then they have to cut it.
why are you so mean?
Most students just there's what's easy and available to them. Like in Crete, we have a Walmart. That's it.
Right.
So they go to Walmart, and I'm like, if they won't spend the 20 minutes to drive to Lincoln, Nebraska, just to, and they're college students, so they don't have the money. So I'm trying to figure out ways to. So they're one lady is doing transparency paper,
Uh-huh.
and then she used her Cricut.
Oh yeah, a
Doing
die
all the
cutter.
Cricut designs and then pulling it off and laying them on her pieces and doing all the design work. So.
I'm not done yet, but here's the one, stage 1. Eric, the carved pattern, it's a similar pattern to one I have, which I call the floret. But is there a reason why you chose to use this, like piercing style? Because I mean, this is like this pattern is like all throughout art history, and
It is.
I'm just curious.
No, when doing research, to be honest, when I went to grad school, I was doing Western pottery. So I'd throw these big fires, and then I would use leather tooling that my grandpa's saddle had on it, and hand carve all that into these large platters. And then I would start doing horsehair and all this other stuff. And then I got to my pre-oral, and basically it was a kitsch. So it was. I come from a Western background. I mean, my dad had every pot still with horseshoes buried into it, and so every time I go home, I'm like, oh, kitsch. I about got kicked out of grad school for doing it.
Really?
Yeah, so I had to throw it all away. So I had to figure out something, and I love Native American pottery. I love Native American, Santa Fe, all that stuff down there. And I love it because, you know, when I put my work compared next to theirs, it blows mine out of the water by far. They didn't use tools. They didn't have rulers. They're all hand painted. They painted with yucca plants for the brushes, and I'm just amazed by that. So I'm just that I would love to study with them, but I would want to break out my clear ruler. So I like that, but I was drawn to basket weaving, like wood turning, basket weaving. I like the over under, the whole strands like that. So you're right. This is on furniture. This is on everything. And I'm kind of getting to the point where it's time for me to start doing a new design. Like I've done a brick, like this electric green pattern. Had like a square cut out. That was actually taken from the wood turners, who had different types of wood, and turned it. Like I took that one from them. I have a diamond pattern, a little triangle pattern that I don't do anymore, because you know I'm raccooing these pieces. Raccoo is also going through thermal shock. A lot of them crack and break already, and I'm cutting holes into them with these sharp points.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting that you have such actually, or seems like a high success rate with such sharp carving, points. I feel like if I attempted that, they would be cracking on every single carve.
Last year, out of 400 pieces, I broke 6.
Good odds.
If they can get through the disc, I'm good. The only reason they don't get through the disc is because I'm rushing them. So when Pottery Making Illustrated called me for their article, they're like, you have 2 weeks. You throw it, pierce it, fire it.
Like, uh-oh.
I was just like, let's do this. So if you look at the article, there's like 3 pieces in there, but it only shows 2.
You don't have to say that.
I do. I'm an honest person. But it worked, and it worked out great. So the piece on the left, up here in the corner, is the one that's in the article, and that bowl. I shot the green one. Is in the article. That's the blue one. The white across. So to get more, I take Meredith. I'm starting. You can see from this bowl that sitting down is all white to the one over there. I'm starting to design more of the back now, because when people are displaying these in the clear stands, they put them on up and you still see the back. So now I'm starting to really work on the back.
I gotta ask, you've got 2 different processes, with throwing and building or hand building. It's such a therapeutic process making the pieces. But then, both of you with design technique, which I like design, there's something pretty time intrusive and therapeutic about designing. Which one's your preference?
Designing, decorating. If you had asked me like 6 years ago, it may have been a different answer. But I really just switched over into loving surface all of a sudden. Like I'm particular about the forms that I'm decorating, because I want them to be a certain way or a certain look. So I still make all of those. However, my true passion is in the decorating these days.
This is a forward piece. Are most of your pieces forward?
A lot of them are now. I mean, I'm still throwing bowls, plates, jars, things like that. A lot of the vases and some of the well, the square dishes and the like rectangle dishes are all cast, and I have recently started casting most of my cups, all from thrown prototypes. And originally I started doing that because I was trying to up my production level. Because I have that retail commercial line, that takes up a certain amount of time in the studio. So I figured if I had to say decal an order for a folded pigs thing, then I could at least still be casting cups at the same time. So that's really the only advantage that I have. I mean, it's maybe more work to finish them when they're slip cast, the cups. That's a slip cast cup. But I try to make them not look slip cast. So they go back on the wheel after they come out of the mold, and I trim the bottom. So I have just a solid flat bottom, and I trim a foot, and then I also will trim the rim so that it doesn't have like a sharp cast sort of look. I want to mimic what I would do for throwing and have a nice lip rim. So when all is said and done, I feel like I end up spending maybe even more time cleaning up the casting, but I saved some time because I was doing something else. You know, this is like a multitasking thing. But I don't know if it's the best solution for that. And when I threw my cups, I mean, I still do throw some, but I have certain ones that have molds. But when people would think, oh, these are cast, because I actually throw them pretty similarly. Like, I'm pretty particular about the way the form is and the size, and so, a series of them would look pretty similar to the point where people assumed they were cast anyway. I'm like, oh no, they're thrown. And then there was a certain pride, like, yeah, those are thrown. And I thought, why am I not just casting them then? If everyone thinks they are anyway, I mean, maybe it would help, production in the studio. And it has, but it hasn't in other ways too. It's not like the amazing solution that saved me so much time. It's not the case. If anything, there are some extra frustrations that can go with casting slip. Are you feeling that right now?
No, I'm actually, casting slip, it does dry, but it's, if you have a sharp X-Acto blade, it should be pretty.
It looks good.
So that's where I'm at. And I'm one that I like to, I want to see what the reflection will look like on the inside versus like, I'm more drawn to some of my pieces. I can just stare at them and what do I see? Because like these I see, I see these. I can't tell people how to put them in the house. That's not my job. But I love seeing these in the middle of a table with a light over it and all my patterns on the table.
Yeah.
And now one collector of mine has these plates, and each one has a spotlight on it. So behind it is the whole negative. And don't get me wrong, when I was a little kid, I used those little kaleidoscopes to see all the different, or you had the little pens you put in those and then do all the designs.
Yeah, the spirograph.
Yeah. So when I wasn't out chasing cows, I was doing that. And it's funny because I did not. I took throwing in high school, and my high school teacher told me I was the worst potter she's ever seen.
What?
I did not want to get dirty. Like, I would dress up in like trash bags. I looked like the Michelin Man. Because and then we were throwing terracotta with like hard terracotta, and it was beating me up. And then, so it got to the point where I had to take it in college. Well, actually,
You had to, or you chose to?
I knew my GPA up, so I said,
Oh, you're one of those?
I am. So then I took pottery, and I'm like, wow, this clay's awesome. So I sat down and just threw immediately. It was a different type of clay, it was different. So it was funny when I went back to school 4 years later, my teacher told me, what'd you get? I was like, I got ceramic, art degree and shit. I still love that story.
Yeah, that's a good one.
She was at the last workshop I did, and she's like, yes, I did tell him that. It pushed me the right way.
Apparently this clay is a little bit stickier than the clay I'm used to. It grabbed the paper,
that will burn off.
Well, it'll burn off, but also what I'll do, once this dries a little bit more, usually if I just rub my finger over the surface, the paper will peel. And this is the one part I need to scrape here. I went over the edge into the bowl. So I'm just using the edge of the wax spatula to clean that up. I usually would use an X-Acto blade, but I don't have one right here. I know you probably have a ton. I have one somewhere here in my mess that I've made already. I'm just going to clean this up.
Do you both look at a lot of contemporary potters today, or are you past that stage?
Oh no, I buy a lot of pots too. I like being surrounded by handmade pieces. So, do you want like examples of people? Like who we are like looking at, or?
There's a couple that I like besides you two that are on the West Coast, Diana Fate and Wendy Smith. who
Oh,
I
yeah.
follow, and I enjoy their work tremendously. And I decide there's who do you kind of admire and gain influence from.
I feel like I could list a million people and then no one comes to mind, you know? It's one of those top 5.
I like a lot of the older ones, but also like there's some amazing artists that I just love their work. Like I'll follow them. You know, it's a chance where you get to meet them. And you're like, oh, I just wanted to like be a little kid in a candy store. So I'm.
So
more
who are
of
those
a-
people?
Huh?
Who are those people?
Doug Peltzman is another one. I love Doug Peltzman's work.
I like his
Doing
work
with
too.
color, line, sizing.
What is his last name?
Peltzman. Peltzman.
Yep.
Love his work. And if you came to the Adam Field, they had him last year where he does porcelain and he does all the carving with celadons over it. So he's even more precise with me, where he'll get the laser level out and shoot a laser across his piece just to draw his lines and every line like that. So I'm really drawn to those precision and precise and color and pattern. Like, you know, I love Meredith's work. I have a lot of it, but it's just that color and pattern and what she does to the form.
I really enjoy Kristen Kiefer's work. We have a love of dot and stripes, so but I think use them in different ways, and she has great color as well. I really like Carrie Radash's work. She's in Maine. Radash, R-A-D-A-S-C-H. And it's Carrie as in K-A-R-I. It's tricky like that.
And there's artists that I like that have nothing to do with my work. Or nothing. Jessica Brandel.
Brandel.
Draw and paint, like, her forms and sculpt. She puts everything together to make one beautiful piece. And it's just
Also, it's like, screen printing and stuff that I really like. Jason Burnett, his work.
these are all artists that will be in the season.
Yeah, they are. They will all be in Antica. That's true.
But I'll be, most of them will be showing. Or doing a lecture or a panel or talking like that, so.
There's like, oh man, I could probably think of a bazillion more, and I'm blanking. Oh, Kyla Toomey. And that, her color palette is more subtle than what I normally am drawn to. Just a lot of white on white, but really beautiful forms. The same with Ingrid Bata. She does more pinchy pieces in porcelain. Not so decorated per se, but really nice form. Let's see. There are not that many as far as.
I like Sheldon's work, but he was just like my mentor growing up, so I'll always respect his work. He does a lot of taping designs and stuff like that. So I'll always admire his work. There's just too many. And the
Too many, so we can't name any. I'm having a problem.
That's like today, like, Facebook used to be pretty big. Now Instagram's huge.
I love Instagram.
So you don't have to have a conversation. You just put a picture, and people can like it, and that's great. So what I tell my students, if they have an Instagram account, go to mine and figure out who I all follow, because there's a lot of ceramic artists that I love. So all those artists that we've talked about
Are all.
all have,
Okay.
and a lot of them post.
And it's an interesting like view into someone's studio also. Most people are basically posting work and how they're making it and their space that they work in. And I think it's really cool to get a weird inside sort of view into their process in studio. Another person who, I don't think he is on Instagram yet. I don't know what he's waiting for, but Sean O'Connell. Love his work too.
He's on Facebook. So you want to take like a little 5-minute break? Walk
Yeah,
around?
maybe like,
Or,
how about a 10-minute break?
or when you get done with that,
Yeah, I'm gonna quickly do a few more little add-ons and
if you guys
then.
want to come, if you guys want to get up, take a break now. If you guys want to come up here and see what she's doing, please do so, because it's hard to see over that bowl. You guys can come around us, things like that.
What about Sean Spangler and Jeff Campana?
Yeah, I'd love their work.